Hello, and welcome back to another RWBY fanfiction reading. So, yeah, it's been a while for me. Um, yeah, I don't really know what to say. um, so the last one that I uploaded was the first part of Life Isn't a Fairy Tale, which you can see the amount of chapters that are in that. There's 15 total chapters, and I have read total 12 of them. And I will get on to the last episode eventually, which, I haven't even uploaded the second video yet, at least at the time of this recording and at the time of this uploading, because I've been kind of like not doing stuff, and yeah. So, here we are. We are reading Cheshire Moon by CourierNinetyTwo. Now, this doesn't look very long. It only has one chapter. And I'll tell you what's happening is that these other two here are also only one chapter. These two being written by the same person, and then these two being written by the same person. So yeah, when somebody requested a Blake and Pyrrha fanfiction, there isn't a lot to go on. Apparently, at least there isn't a lot of stuff that I can actually read. As far as I actually don't remember. This was a long time ago when I looked at this. So, we might be reading all three today. Who knows? That's going to make for a very interesting description, but I'll have to work that out. Obviously, keep these here for quite a while. Well, if I can actually upload videos, then maybe not very long, and I can get rid of all this stuff. But yeah, so that is that. I don't know what to say. Yeah. So we shall get started with reading Cheshire Moon, which is obviously a much shorter story and only includes Blake and Pyrrha. I assume there might be a couple other characters, but not really. So, on Archive of Our Own, which I've used some, but not a lot. So you can have a series, so you can put different books in a series. So if you wanted to build one off the other, make one of them a little bit shorter, and then instead of making a full story, just which could be a ton of parts. Like this one, you could cut it down and put it in a separate story. Which it's not really gonna make too much of a difference on this, where you just get stories for free. These people writing their stories for free. Just thank you for you probably deserve to get paid, because there's some quality story writing in here, but anyways, we shall get on with this. So I don't really know what's going on with this. Obviously, this could be not great, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. And then I'll tell you that this story right here is technically the second part in this series, as I've already looked. So, yeah. We might just have to do it anyways. And then immediately after I looked at what this story was, it's also got one part, so it's also got one chapter, so yeah, alright. Let's go. Blake lit the tip of an unfiltered Schnee Gold. Yep, gotta have those cigarettes. And inhaled. The bartender shot her a look when she blew out a ring of smoke, more irritated than impressed. It was that kind of night. Everyone packed elbow to elbow at the bar, ashtrays overflowing as warm whiskey was poured by the glass and shoved down the counter to waiting hands. There was no ice to be found in the whole place, not for the witching hour show. The Three Apples wasn't the classiest joint in Vale, but it was the only place to hear pure Nico sing. That meant drunk dock workers were within arm's reach of hunters and honest-to-dust political types. It was the perfect recipe for a front-page brawl, but there wasn't a single one of them that wanted to risk getting kicked out before the curtain opened. She only played on Fridays, and a week was a long time to go without that three-octave siren's call deep in their bones. When the top lights went off and a glow was cast on the stage, someone let out a whoop of excitement before the entire bar went quiet. Breaths held in unison. A few huffs and chuckles followed when Pierre's piano man came out, his blonde hair slicked back but his bow tie a bit loose. John was his name, barely old enough to earn the whiskers on his chin, although it didn't stop him from playing up and down the ivories like one of the old greats had possessed his fingers. Blake knew he was a good kid, even if he had a habit of getting in over his head. His warm-up started out slow and worked up to jaunty, imitating a old sailor song as the keys were tuned. Even if it wasn't their type of music, there were still several tapping feet under the tables. Pierre had personally thrown out the last patron who told John to play something new or hurry up to the main event. There's nothing like a 6-foot-tall dame in heels hoisting the mayor's aide out onto the concrete, leaving him to stumble home without tripping over his own 20 lien shoes. Sean tightened his bow tie and shook his head, taking a breath before breaking into an ostinato pattern, the quickening weave of notes announcing it was time. The curtains parted once more, a first glimpse of an olive thigh earning murmurs of awe. Plenty of singers wore something slinky or showed a bit of skin, but even a godless man would whisper a prayer at the sight of Pierre Nikos taking the stage, looking like a bronze sculpture brought to life. Okay. A mass of crimson hair was barely held in a web of golden mesh, the emerald teardrops adorning her ears nothing compared to the pure bright green of her eyes. With a dress and lipstick to match and a lattice of tiny gold links pouring over both shoulders, there wasn't a patron in the whole bar who could think of looking away. Blake choked back a cough. She'd held in the smoke of her cigarette a few seconds too long. Pierre stepped up to the microphone, smile projecting 50,000 watts and yet still entirely sincere. Welcome to the Three Apples. I'll be your host for the last part of the night. Somewhere in the crush of the crowd, someone shouted, Pyrrha! Her mouth quirked just a degree to the side, amusement restrained. We won't be having any arguments or anything tonight, will we, boys? These stilettos aren't for show. Goodness. That sent plenty of murmurs through the room. Blake caught one or two no ma'ams from further down the bar. Pierre took their unanimous agreement as her cue, eyes closing halfway before her lips parted for the first note of the performance. Place an average Joe with a full brass section in one of the best arenas in the kingdom, and he might be able to belt out a song or two without busting everyone's ears. But Pierre needed no accompaniment except John's sedate piano, every key he struck following her voice up and down the register, amplifying the sound like an ancient chorus. She could set grown hunters to weeping with a war ballad only to seduce everyone within earshot with a sultry serenade. Blake had heard the song too many times to count, had every lilt and fall memorized like a curved trigger of Gamble's Shroud, but that didn't lessen the effect. Pierre was enchanting. There was simply no other word for it. Only when the last note trailed off did Blake remember to stub out the cigarette hanging limply from her mouth, nearly dabbing it in the whiskey instead of the ashtray. She had considered lighting up another, the burn of tobacco as much a habit as a comfort. But Pierre didn't smoke, and that stilled Blake's hand. It was bad enough for the voice, or it was bad for the voice or something. No, I never would have guessed. Instead, she settled back in her seat, letting the single malt soothe her throat in place of another gasper. Every week, it was over too soon. Pierre gave encores, or 3, when the crowd asked politely, but eventually the bar had to close. Last rounds passed out before the taps were turned off. Jean's fingers stilled against the piano. The smile he cast Pierre's way as she bowed out, nothing short of worship. He swept out his playbook and gave a bow of his own, pulling the lid down over the keys before disappearing into the back. The applause didn't die until a minute after the curtains closed, as if enough celebration might draw Pierre back out on the stage, but the bouncers were starting to hustle the worst of the drunks out already, ensuring they didn't get overexcited and make a mess of the old wooden floor. Blake let out a sigh, shoving the half-crushed pack of cigarettes back into her trench coat. She had been about to stand up when the bartender approached, something clenched in one of his fists. "You're that private eye, right?" he asked, heavy brow knitting. "Blackmore or something?" "You might be thinking of another cat," Blake said. "Name's Belladonna." "Oh, right, that's what she said." A napkin was shoved across the bar, crumpled at the edges. "This is for you." Blake picked up the napkin before smoothing against her palm. There was a single initial on the surface, placed beside a kiss mark, and the shade of lipstick so very familiar. She didn't need the code spelled out, not after this long. "Meet me in the back." Pocketing the napkin, Blake drew out a few loosely and dropping the coins on into the bartender's upturned palm. "That's for your trouble." Blake flashed a smile and stood up, pushing past a pair of sisters whispering about making it big time. Everyone wanted to make it big in Vale, but the city wasn't the easy sort. No matter how cramped the Three Apples seemed in front, it was practically a labyrinth in back. Hallways barely wide enough for Blake's shoulders, twisting and turning 100 ways. She hadn't been able to find the dressing rooms until Pierre had showed her personally once. There were colored chalk lines along most of the doorways, a private key for guiding those in the know to the right place. A snort from her right made Blake reach for her piece, only to see that John had left his door open a crack, already passed out on his bunk without having bothered to do more than kick off his shoes. Pierre's room was right next to it, although the door was definitely closed. There was a line of light visible at the bottom, proving it was occupied. Blake rapped twice before clearing her throat and straightening her tie. There wasn't much she could do about her hair, having been mashed under a hat for most of the day to hide her ears from the real cop types, but Pierre had told her the shortcut was rakish once. Maybe the offset look would be charming. "Blake, is that you?" Pierre's voice was slightly muffled. There was no mistaking those liquid tones for anyone else. "Yeah, it's me." Blake's hand went to the doorknob. "Can I come in?" "It's unlocked," Pierre said. Blake slipped inside, pushing the door closed behind her with a soft click. At a second thought, she twisted the lock above. Pierre could kick her out any time, but she felt better about the fact that some jumped-up fan couldn't stumble their way inside without any notice. Her eyes swept over the room, looking for the other woman, but at the sight of a tall silhouette behind a privacy screen made Blake's heart start doing double time. She stayed back near the door, not wanting to presume, eyes averted from the slice of the mirror that was in view. "I wasn't sure you wanted to see me," Blake said, burying her hands in the pockets of her coat. "We kind of had it out last time." There was a soft sound of metal hitting wood, the drawer of a jewelry box drawn open. "Your apology was very sweet. I hope you tipped the florist." "Of course, not that Nora ever wants to take my money when it comes to you." Leaning back against the door, Blake let out a sigh. "Did you hear something new about Adam?" Since then, a silence then, and Blake grit her teeth, knowing she had just struck a sore spot. Pierre said nothing until she emerged from behind the screen, dress exchanged for a plum silk robe that stopped just below the knees. All the jewelry was gone except the earrings, hair loose and flowing wildly. Blake's breath caught in her throat as she glanced firmly at the floor, not wanting to set any more fires, the destructive kind anyway. "Nothing more than I heard last week." Pierre's words were soft, holding none of the judgment Blake knew she deserved. "You're going to kill yourself chasing ghosts." "Adam's not a ghost," Blake growled. "He hurt a lot of people I care about." "And you already took his eyes." "It's been a year now." Pierre's fingers tilted her chin up, forcing their eyes to meet. Even without heels, the other woman had a few inches over Blake. "You look tired." "Nothing some black coffee in the morning won't cure," Blake said weakly. "You're staying." Pierre didn't have to insist. There was no arguing that tone. "I don't want you driving like this." Fingers splayed against her jaw, cupping one dark cheek, and Blake found herself pulled into a kiss. There wasn't a whiskey in the world that could give her the warmth of the other woman's mouth, the infinite tenderness that she could only answer with supplication. Pierre's other hand found its way into her hair, threading through the short black strands before caressing just near the base of violet-lined ears. Blake let out a soft sound of relief, shoulders sagging as she slid her hands down Pierre's back, feeling the heat there even through the silk. "Whatever you say," Blake finally murmured when they broke apart. She was pretty sure her hair was even more of a mess now, but she wouldn't have it any other way. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't make promises you can't keep, Blake, Pierre warned. I still need to take a bath. Have some water and cool your heels on the bed. The detective's only as good as her word, Miss Nikos, Blake replied wryly, putting up her hands in a gesture of surrender when one red brow arched in her direction. Where do you want me to put my gun? In the drawer next to mine, the woman said, turning the lock on the door. There's still a hook for your coat in the closet. With that, Pierre was gone, leaving nothing behind but the sweet scent of apple perfume. Blake shrugged off her trench coat and hung it up, careful not to ruffle the scarves and stoles worth half a year's pay. She drew Gambleshroud from its holster, black and silver revolver shining from a recent polish, and opened Pierre's bedside drawer, setting the gun alongside the other woman's custom piece, which was small enough to fit in a handbag and yet packed a punch like a shotgun. Blake didn't have the first idea where Pierre had gotten it, but she never wanted to be on the wrong side of the barrel. Setting her shoes beside those neck-breaking heels, Blake worked open the knot of her tie, folding it into a soft coil and setting it aside. It took a few minutes to find where Pierre's cups had gotten to, but she obediently filled one from the sink down the hall before returning to the dressing room, guzzling down its contents. She rolled her shoulders in a slow stretch, feeling a slight tug of her suspenders before she climbed onto Pierre's bed, feeling the mattress sink luxuriously under her weight. Though she never took off herself, knowing the other one preferred to do it personally. Oh boy. When the door opened again, Blake couldn't help a broad smile. Pierre was flushed from the warmth of the bath, hair dried and tossed over one shoulder. Green eyes flickered to the empty water glass before she shook her head slightly, lips quirking in a smile. The distance was closed between them with careful steps, Pierre stopping just short of the bed as Blake sat up. Hands kept restrained at both sides. Don't get any ideas about running off in the middle of the night, Pierre said firmly. I want us to have breakfast at Wren's. Blake let out a soft laugh. I can't say no to that man's cooking. They kissed again, and she heard the robe fall to the floor in a whisper of silk. For one more night, Blake could let herself forget the rest of the world. It wasn't half as bright without Pierre in it, anyway. Alright, well that was that. I did not look at the time when I started, but I'm guessing... Let's just keep going. So, yeah. We have Caught and Tied, also by CourierNinetyTwo. Yeah. What's going on out there? Yeah, it's basically what I got. I got nothing. It looks to be, like, essentially after that story, and yeah, alright. So let us get on to it. And then we'll see if we want to do this one, which we might just have to anyways, just because it's so short, and I could make a very short video for it, so yeah, probably could do that anyways. Caught in the Tide. 6 bullets left. Blake cursed under her breath, shoving the last of the ammunition into Gambleshroud's chamber. This job had gone south so fast it might as well have been a trans-meridian flight, and leaving blood spilled all over the docks wasn't exactly how she planned to take in the glow of the midnight hour. Getting back a prized cane was a cakewalk job, if there ever was one, but Junior Zhang had brought 10 kinds of backup, including a pair of twins throwing knives around like a 3-ring circus act. Ozma was going to pay double plus expenses, or Blake would throw his twice-damned walking stick right over the pier and into the ocean. Just leave the cane, Cat, and you can get out of this alive. Blake quickly glanced around the corner of the building, catching sight of a machine gun with enough heat to fill her and any getaway car full of holes. She had managed to disable the twins by knocking over a wall of crates and leaving them stuck in a warehouse that would blow up like a powder keg if they used a lighter to pierce the darkness. But there was only one walkway back up to the streets, and Junior had his barrel pointed up the narrow alleyway, waiting for Blake to make a run for it. Alright, Blake yelled, drawing back the hammer of Gambleshroud. I'll roll it across the floor, but I don't want you plugging my arm full of lead. Let me hear that belt of bullets hit the ground, huh? There was a grunt of hesitation, but after a moment, a clatter of brass hitting the wood made all four of Blake's ears twitch. She took a breath, bearing down for the chance that Junior might be a crack enough shot to squeeze off a round or two before she could get out of range, and darted out, breaking into a sprint. The walkway creaked and groaned under her shoes, a few rotten planks threatening to snap, and Junior's yell of rage echoed across the docks. Blake heard the clip of the machine gun click back into place right before she leapt onto the asphalt, turning the corner just as a hail of bullets tore through the air. All of them missed but one. Blake heard her trench coat tear a split second before a hot jolt of pain lanced through her side. The bejeweled cane suddenly felt twice as heavy, her fingers briefly slipping around its lacquered handle before she managed to tuck it under the arm holding the pistol. Teeth grit as blood started to trickle down her ribs, soaking through the shirt she'd just bought last week. Her car was only a street away, but trying to drive like this was asking for an accident on the maze of switchback roads up to Osmond's crumbling old mansion. It took a second to get her bearings, on alert for the sound of Junior's heavy footsteps, but if she could cut through the main street and hop a fence, Blake forced her flagging lungs to bear the agony of another dash up the pavement. Grateful that it was late enough for the rest of the city was asleep, save for the occasional sluggish taxi. Her side was aching with every step, refusing to heal while there was still a bullet embedded into the flesh. But she could make it 2 more blocks. She had to. The fence was the sticking point. Blake came to a halt in front of wooden slats, briefly bending over to catch her breath. It was only up to her neck, but there weren't any good holds, and both her arms were already shot from a long night of fisticuffs with back-flipping twins. She let out a groan and threw the cane over the fence, shoving Gambler's strap back into its holster and buckling in tight. Spotting a trash can under a pile of yesterday's newspapers, Blake dragged it in front of the fence, praying it would stay put just long enough for her to barrel over. The aluminum clanged as she put one foot on top of it, and the can wobbled dangerously before Blake hoisted herself past the pointed edges of the fence, leaving the palms of both gloves riddled with splinters. Hitting the ground hurt more than the jump, one ankle threatening to give up completely, but Blake snagged the cane and worked back up to a quickened shuffle, looking for an apartment with a red window. It was another brown stone away and 3 flights of stairs up, the latter draining away the dregs of adrenaline fueling her escape. By the time she reached the door with a custom-lettered "Do Not Disturb" sign, Blake slumped to her knees, head striking the burgundy-painted surface in lieu of a knock. She gasped for air, trying to use the cane to stand again, but it was futile. Oh my goodness, my throat hurts. Okay. Blake slumped to her knees, head striking the burgundy-painted surface in lieu of a knock. She gasped for air, trying to use the cane to stand again, but it was futile. Her legs turned to rubber and black spots dancing on the edge of her vision. All she could do was pray the 3 apples hadn't asked for too many encores tonight. A soft click signaled the deadbolt opening. Blake let out a sigh of relief that turned into a yelp as the door swung open, depriving her of one surface where she had any balance. It might not have been the first time she'd collapsed on the floor with a bullet in her hide, but it was definitely the first time it ever happened at Pierre Nico's feet. Blake, oh my! Strong hands gripped under her arms, the room spinning as Pierre somehow managed to drag her past the threshold into the apartment. The door was shut with a slam, the locks turned and the chain set before Blake found herself eased into a chair, the vision blurring in a mosaic of red and gold before focusing on the lines of Pierre's face, gone tight with worry. Her fingers went numb, the cane falling to the floor, smeared with blood from where she had held it, clutched to her side. "Where are you hurt?" Pierre asked, already stripping off her trench coat. "A lot of places," Blake coughed, tasting bile. "Shot in the ribs is what's not healing, though." Buttons popped and flew as Pierre tugged her shirt open, absinthe glass eyes going wide at the sight of dark stain that already spread through the fabric. Blake closed her eyes, fighting to stay conscious as the other woman's fingers prodded near the wound, sending a flare of agony through already riled nerves. The bullet was definitely still in there. She could feel it, her aura fighting the intrusion. "Can you see it?" Blake wheezed. "Yes, although I don't have," Pierre hesitated. "I have a knife and whiskey, Blake, unless you want me to call a doctor." "I know you have the star power to get a middle-of-the-night house call, Pierre, but unless you have the doc living on the first floor, I'm not..." Blake let out a shaking sigh. "It might not be fast enough." The hand on her side, warm and comforting for what little good it did to stop the bleeding, pulled away. Blake's eyes fluttered open halfway, but Pierre was already in the kitchen behind her, bottles and cabinet doors rattling. A steel blade slid free from its chopping block with a soft ting, followed by a muttered curse in Pierre's native tongue as a drawer was opened, pulling something else from its depths. "I have tweezers too, I suppose." Pierre came back into her fading sphere of vision, pushing an uncorked bottle of single malt between Blake's blood-slicked gloves. "Next time I'm at the drugstore, I think I'll stock up on some proper anesthetic." Blake choked down a long gulp of the whiskey, her throat already ablaze from the run and not taking kindly to the burn of alcohol. Pierre tossed a towel onto her lap, trying to set out the makeshift supplies in an orderly fashion before dabbing away as much blood from the wound as was possible. It would keep trickling out as her body tried to heal around the bullet, unable to force it out from some ill luck of the angle. "I think it's..." Pierre felt it against Blake's side again, earning a groan of pain. "It might have stuck in your rib." "I was getting that idea," Blake said, following the words with another quick sip from the bottle. "I'm sorry." Pierre's overhead light reflected off the knife, giving it a dull gleam. "This is definitely going to hurt." There was little to do but try not to bite through her own tongue as Pierre began to ease the bullet out, or at least cut wide enough for the tweezers to slide through and yank the mashed-up slug free. Even with the whiskey desperately trying to cool her blood, Blake couldn't see anything past the white glare of agony until she heard the wet strike of metal against a rug worth 3 times of what she made in a year. She was going to have to buy out Nora's entire stock of flowers and take Pierre on one of those couples cruises. Or to spend the rest of her life apologizing. That might do. Sorry, just need a break from the constant reading and saying things. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. It's closing. Pierre's relief was palpable, although I can't say it won't leave a scar. You'll have plenty of company. Blake felt a bit steadier on her next breath now that she wasn't leaking like a cheap airship engine. "Sorry about the rug." "The rug?" The woman's voice shot up nearly an octave as Blake held back a groan. Pain was the least of her problems at this stage. "You promised you were going to start bringing backup on dangerous jobs." Oh my goodness. You promised you were going to start bringing backup on dangerous jobs." "It wasn't dangerous," Blake protested, gesturing weakly to the cane. "Ozpin, that professor type that lives up the hill. Some thugs broke in and took his, well, he called it an alchemical stone or something. But it's just a walking stick with a jewel on top. I went to get it back." "Without backup," Pierre said sharply. "Junior Zhang is a 2-bit gunner who can barely tie his own shoes." Blake set the whiskey bottle aside, not wanting to get drunk on top of everything else. "Didn't think he was going to have 6 guys in a damn knife-throwing act with him." Pierre stood up, wiping her hands on a towel. "You lied to me." "All right, Blake hung her head. "I screwed up. I thought I could do it myself. I'm sorry." When she hazarded a glance upward, sympathy was slowly wearing through Pierre's anger like water etching a path through stone. They fought every so often, maybe more than a pair should, but the other woman had a big heart for everything and everyone, and Blake knew she had to quit tripping up and stepping on it. I'm sorry, Blake repeated. I'll put out an ad on the scroll tomorrow for a partner, first thing. You're a mess. Pierre's palm gently cupped her cheek. I'm going to run some water for a bath. Oh, goodness. Need some water. Like seriously. Well, that was good. Okay. Hopefully that doesn't, ruin your time here. Me taking just a water break. Okay. Blake could only nod, guilt sinking. He should have left the water next to me. God damn it. Or at least within arm's reach, because it definitely was not in arm's reach without me getting up. Although I am ruining the rug to this. Ow. I'm just making a mess of this whole recording. Okay. Blake could only nod, guilt sinking down into her stomach like a block of cement. There were plenty of bruises and cuts that her body was catching up on, the harsh ache of overtaxed muscles flaring as she pried off her gloves and undid the last remaining button on her shirt, tugging off each sleeve with a hiss of pain. After slipping off her shoes and socks, Blake staggered to her feet, fingers fumbling with the buckle of her belt as she took slow, deliberate steps towards the bathroom. The tub was huge, one of those clawfoot types that could hold a belly of water deep enough to drown in. It was slowly starting to fill from the faucet, pipes rattling and clanging as the heater kicked in. Pierre was facing the mirror above the sink, removing her earrings. She didn't look up when Blake approached, not until Blake stopped behind her, reaching to undo the clasp of the necklace still weighing heavily around the other woman's throat. Their eyes met in a reflected image, steam beginning to encroach along the edges of the glass. "How's the crowd tonight?" Blake asked softly, letting the necklace slide down into Pierre's waiting hand. No rowdier than usual. Pierre placed each piece of the jewelry into a small set of drawers next to the sink. "Don't think I've forgiven you so easily, Blake." "I'm not asking for forgiveness." Leaning forward, her brow could just touch the warm plane of Pierre's shoulder, the difference in their height too much to cradle in the curve of the other woman's neck. I know I've done this too many times. Losing you would," Pierre drew in a slow breath. "The thought gives me nightmares." "You know Blake could feel her mouth trying to form the next word, but it caught in her tongue. Turning the sentiment into a mess of syllables, she fumbled for a substitute. "Care about you more than anyone else." Pierre nodded, both hands clutching the porcelain rim of the sink. Finished getting undressed. Blake took a step back, unzipping her trousers and pushing them down to the floor with her underwear. The tub was already was past its halfway mark, sure to spill over once it was occupied if the faucet was left running too much longer, and she reached over to turn the small metal wheel until the water stopped flowing. Stepping on over the smooth wall and into the bath, the bath made Blake bite back a wince, but the warmth was a relief as soon as it started to soak into her muscles. Dirt and blood alike scalded from her skin. The bullet wound wept a bit more, tendrils of red spouting through the water, but it had sealed from the inside enough that Blake knew she would survive the night. What you didn't expect was Pyrrha to follow, the nightgown with lace brushing against the other woman's knees, ending up on top of her trousers. Blake eased her legs apart to make room, watching as Pyrrha kneeled between her thighs, lines of fatigue blunting the last sharp edges of a well-deserved fury. There was something brighter, though, the affection they had nurtured in quiet hours, back in dressing rooms and smoke-laden bars. Passion stolen in all the places no one would expect to find them together. You left your spare clothes from your car last time, Pierre murmured, water shifting in miniature waves as the other woman leaned forward. So there's something for you to wear this in the morning. Blake slid her hands into Pierre's hair, wild and red, ignoring the faint sting of still bruised knuckles. You want me to stay? I always want you to stay, Pierre said, leaving no room for argument. Their lips met, the contact brief and gentle until Blake encouraged more, ensuring Pierre that it didn't hurt. Each exchange lasted longer than the next until they were quietly gasping, the heat of the water only emphasizing the friction between their bodies. Dark sparks of desire that danced across Blake's dark limbs and Pierre's sun-kissed curves. It was always like this, a fire neither of them could extinguish, despite anger, despite grief. Blake let out a faint sigh, watching as a long lock of Pierre's hair drifted into the water, turning sanguine, I guess. Going further was out of the question, considering the state she was in. In the morning, Pierre whispered against her mouth, as if reading her thoughts. Just be with me. Always, Blake echoed quietly, drawing the other woman down into another kiss. Well then, that was probably quite a long story, I'd say. Or I guess just those. So it looks like it's the only. It's basically just two chapters turned into two separate stories. So yeah, that is it for this. More Blake and Pyrrha stuff, because even though you haven't seen too much of this, I'll tell you this is mostly Weiss and Yang. That's all I'm going to tell you, is that it's mostly Weiss and Yang. There is some Blake and Pyrrha, but it's less of a focus. And then I actually don't know about this, but yeah, well, I think it's like the only one in there, but we're going to do that in a shorter episode, because, I mean, it's probably going to be, I don't need to spend 30 minutes reading in an episode, so, yeah, I'll have both links in the description, which I haven't said up to this point, but yes, so if you want to go read them for yourself, or save them in your. I honestly don't know how this works, or fully how this works. But yeah, if you want to save them, or I guess download them, because I think you can do that as well. Or just look more at this. I don't know. You can go to those links for the stories, and then make sure to do this. Your daily-ish reminder. So yeah, that was Treasure Moon and Caught in the Tide. Next time will be the second part, I think, of this story, which I've already recorded, but hasn't been uploaded. And then after that will be White Knight by Adam Grayson. Again, I have no idea what this is about. I think it might also be another story that doesn't really focus on Blake and Pyrrha, but these relationship things are quite helpful for finding, at least some notes of relationship in something. But I mean, this is not exactly like the most common thing in the world, so the person who asked for it, you're getting at least one good story. That's technically two, but yeah. Anyways, let's be done. I gotta move on. I gotta drink some water so I can stop, hacking up a lung, because I can't drink enough water just in general. Oh, God. I don't know what to say.